What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Friends of Five. My name is Matthew Perdomo.
And I'm Ryan Lasner. We have a very special guest today from Channel 10 News, Clay Ferraro. How you doing today, Clay? You're on mute right now.
Oh, so okay, there we go.
No longer.
There you go.
So how you doing, Clay? Thanks for taking your time out today.
Look, usually it's just my wife that mutes me like that. So, Matthew, you're in good company, my man.
Oh, okay, great. Go.
Thanks, man. All right, so essentially, we just want to go over some key things. The Miami Heat season's about to start. You've been one of the few people that have been in on the interviews, the conversations. You also even tweeted out something recently where ESPN gave the Miami Heat like a 0% chance of being a championship contender. Do you think that's even fair or realistic going into the upcoming finishing of the season?
0% no. Honestly, guys, only because I don't think we have any clue what's going to happen. And I think this goes for a lot of sports, by the way. I don't think it's just the NBA. I think, hey, we cover the Marlins too. And look, I'm not saying the Marlins are going to win the World Series. I'm not going there. And yet, yeah, there you go. I feel like there's a sense among some of these teams that it's not just going to be about talent right now. And many times talent is the biggest decider when it comes to these things. And yet the Marlins right now are really embracing this "why not us" feeling and this motto that they're undertaking. And I think the Heat feel the same way, not just that. And they're a really talented team. And Jimmy Butler has said that a few times. He said, look, don't underestimate the talent on this squad. And yet I think the thing that they feel sets them apart and what's giving them an extra level of confidence in this scenario is their mental toughness. The whole Heat culture thing that people outside of South Florida might laugh at, not just do they buy into it, but they embrace it. And, you know, they love this type of challenge. They don't love being away from their families, but they love the work that's involved with this. So, no, I don't think a 0% chance really is fair for anyone. Heck, you could see somebody like Portland come out of nowhere because that's a team that has been missing a lot of guys all year. We just don't know what's going to happen. Do I think it's going to be one of the big three amongst Milwaukee, the Lakers, and the Clippers? Probably. And yet, I think a 0% chance for anybody heading into this scenario outside of Washington. I think a 0% chance for anybody is a little bit unfair.
That's a good point.
Yeah, that's definitely unfair. I feel like this has really benefited the Heat in some ways. For example, Jimmy was hurt almost. I mean, he had a bunch of little things going on with him. Myers Leonard was hurt. Tyler Hero was hurt. I mean, so how much has this benefited? I know that, yes, the coronavirus has been horrible to a lot of people, and I understand that. But basketball-wise, how much has this benefited the Miami Heat? And how much is it going to benefit being in this bubble and this structure? Because I know somebody like Jimmy Butler is going to thrive in this little system that's going on.
Well, all you have to do is go back to the beginning of the season. And the Heat were a team that I think we all felt it would take a little while for things to come together, that – you're adding a new best player on the team. You're adding a new centerpiece. And so, okay, you know, hey, we saw it when the big three came together. It didn't just click immediately. So, hey, you bring in a new face of your franchise. It's certainly going to well, it didn't. I mean, they hit the floor running and things came together very quickly. And then to your point, guys got hurt. And I think there's this thing with the Heat that they only know one speed. And I think that caught up with them a little bit as the regular season went on. You have other teams that understand that, hey, you pace yourselves a little bit. The Heat don't do that. They come out and they go full bore right out of the gates. And so I think even more so than most teams, that type of attitude is going to help them in this sprint because it really is a sprint. And they're going to get in there for 8 games and see what they've got. But Eric Spoelstra has made it pretty clear that he's got his eyes on the playoffs, and he knows that there's really only a chance of them playing one of 3 teams in the postseason in that first round. And so I think he's already doing so much scouting about gearing towards those teams. And it's not just the fact that these guys were able to get healthy, but their video guys have been working on this. And so I think this team has had a really good plan that I think is going to benefit them once they get going in that bubble.
Nice. So do you have plans for August 1st? As you know, it's going to be Heat, Marlins, and Panthers. It's a Saturday. Are you going to be at home with the family, or are you going to be do you have other plans?
Both. I'll be at home with the family, but also monitoring every game. The way things are set up right now, and it's, let me let me backtrack on that a little bit. Remind me, is that a Marlins home game? Is that, I have to go back and look. I know we'll have to see what I can't remember if it's a home game or not. But,
well, it's opening day. I'm going to say no, but I don't know for sure.
Well, their opening day is coming up a week from today. We're recording this Friday. It's a week from today. I mean, they're gonna, and that's what's great about this is they're coming quickly. You know, they play a week from today in their first game, and so, but they are going to play that game. It's against Atlanta. I can't remember.
It is at home. It's at home.
It is at home. So I may end up at that game while the other two are going on. But you know, just so you guys and the viewers and listeners know kind of how we're doing things right now, I have an entire computer set up in our guest room. My poor wife, she's had to watch me turn our guest room into a secondary TV studio that has, you know, my iPad set up for what we're doing. But, and this is to your question, we have the ability to monitor and record games as they're going on. And we have the ability to edit highlights and video and things like that in digital broadcast quality. And so the way things are going right now, we're not amongst the NBA media that are going to be inside the bubble for every game. We may go here and there and do some live reports outside and just see what's going on. But, hey, we're going to be watching with you guys. But then once we see a big play, we're going to be running in, make sure that we have it edited and ready to go for the shows. And, yeah, that day we're going to have to be extra efficient because we've got 3 different games going on back to back to back, and we got to have all those covered.
Did you have to set up that whole little TV studio, Clay, or is it, do your people do that for you?
No, that's all me. And the funny thing is, so and so you kind of do trial and error, right? And it started with, I had this ugly, awful setup in front of a closet. I thought it would be a good idea to like hang jerseys, just like have them coming out of a closet. I have no idea what possessed me to do that because that was atrocious. So then I eventually moved everything into our guest room, and you know, I mean, it's South Florida. I have some. I'm really fortunate, and I've got some cool stuff. I used to love memorabilia and collecting memorabilia, so I've got some cool stuff that I've got this Jackie Robinson autographed. It's an autographed check, but it's matted against a picture, and so I've got stuff like that. A Bill Russell autographed shoe. It's just some old school stuff that I would just, you know, move them in and out of Michael Jordan jersey and stuff like that. And then finally I realized, what am I doing? I'm in South Florida. I may as well. And I actually, the Dolphins media relations, the head of Dolphins media relations texted me one day and just said, hey, what's your address? And I gave it to him. He sent me a brand new Dolphins jersey to kind of hang up there. I was like, all right, fine. We're going to go all South Florida now. So it's kind of like evolved where it was super ugly at the beginning. And then now it's probably only super ugly to the other people who have to live in this house because they have to walk by and see it. But like I just kind of like having the Miami sports setup in there.
Head of Dolphins people, me and Ryan Lasner would take any jerseys you're willing to send. Our Twitter handles are right here on the screen. Okay.
Well, and see, I knew, and he didn't even ask me. He just sent it, and when it showed up and it was a quadruple XL. I knew that he was giving it to me to hang it up and not to wear. So he took good care of us.
So do you have, does Will Manso go over like in you guys chat, or is it all FaceTime with that as well?
Well, so for a while we were going in on Sunday nights because we have, in addition to our daily sportscast, we have a Sunday night show, Sports Sunday, Lexus Sports Sunday. And so we would get to congregate on those times, and they would allow us in the building for a couple of hours on Sunday nights. And then a couple of weeks ago, we had an outbreak at our station, and people are still recovering. Our chief meteorologist just got out of the hospital.
Wow.
Our main anchor's husband, who's also a reporter for us, had to go to the hospital because of the coronavirus. And so thankfully, everybody's out of the hospital now and trending back in a positive direction. But at that point, I think even going in one day a week just seemed, let's just hold off a little bit. So, but no, I mean, Will, our producer, Dookie Lang, and I are on various chat threads. There's one with just the 3 of us. There's another one with another buddy. There's another one with some other people at work. So like we're going back and forth all day, and we'll just talk smack about sports, about whatever. They like to give me a hard time about the New Orleans Saints because I was born in Louisiana and still follow the Saints, and Virginia Tech because they're terrible and they can't recruit worth anything right now. So they like to give me a hard time, and I'll give them a hard time about stuff. So, you know, we had that in-person stuff for a while, but we've been keeping it up with texting, and that kind of helps us, I think, in addition to having the formal sorts of discussions, it kind of we kind of know where everybody stands on certain things, and so it kind of helps dictate. All right, Clay, I know you're really passionate about this. Why don't you take this for today? Will, I know you're passionate about this. Why don't you do this for today? And
Nice.
and so we kind of bounce things off of each other. And just the fact we kind of have those relationships, I think, helps make our work life a bit easier.
Cool. So back with the Heat, those three teams you talked about, who do you think those three teams are going to be that the Heat are, focusing on so much right now, like you said, and getting all that tape for, because they really think that those are going to be the teams?
Well, I mean, obviously the biggest two are Philadelphia and Indiana. And then to a lesser extent, potentially Boston. And I guess mathematically, Toronto is still a possibility, but on the fringe, obviously. And there would have to be something where, you basically decide that they don't feel like playing any of these seeding games and just staying healthy for the first round of the playoffs, so they rest everybody. I don't see that happening. So, I think they're laser focused right now. It's a balance, right? Because like Spo said, they're going to play all these games to win. All these 8 seeding games, they're going to play. Heck, they're going to play these scrimmage games to win, because that's what they're made of. And yet they understand what the goal is here. And I keep saying this. There's this strange confidence with this team right now where they've heard other players complaining about the food. They've heard players complaining about being in quarantine. They've heard players complaining about being in the bubble on other teams. And I just think there's this sense among them that we have a big goal in mind here. I know what everybody else thinks about us. We know what other people believe our ceiling is, what ESPN believes we have a 0% chance of doing. And yet I think they understand that there's an opportunity for them to do something special. And so big part of that is make sure you're ready for your first round playoff matchup. And so I think they're laser focused on whoever they end up playing. And look, guys, I'm sure we'll get into this a bit more. I don't know if you read Zach Lowe's piece on ESPN, but he was talking about matchups and matchups that are going to define the NBA playoffs and the restart. And one thing he pointed out was how Bam Adebayo has locked down Giannis. And so we're all going to be looking at this and, can the Heat get up to the 3? Can they find a way to maybe unseat ball? Or are they going to have to settle for playing Indiana or Philadelphia in the first round? And yet I don't know, man. I think there's a confidence about this team that whenever they have to play whoever the top dog is, I think they feel like they can do something.
Alrighty. So after this season, and I guess after next season, or even going into next season for the Heat, who do you think realistically we might be able to land, whether it's Bradley Beal, Giannis, or Oladipo?
Victor Oladipo has been the worst kept secret for the last couple of years, right? I think he has a gym here. Does his mother live down here? There's a number of connections with him and South Florida, and so I don't buy in too much to the whole idea that him not playing this restart for Indiana, or if he does end up deciding to play, that somehow affects whether or not he ultimately ends up leaving Indiana. I think what ends up affecting that is, number one, I believe he wants to be in South Florida. Number two, they did not offer him the full max. And so I think once they offered him, I think it was $480, I think he was ready to roll out, which is understandable. Right. So I think that one has been the worst kept secret. And at this point, I would be surprised if Victor Oladipo were not in a Heat uniform in the next couple of years. And honestly, the only way I think it doesn't happen would be if for some reason the Heat were able to pull off a Giannis and Bradley Beal type of duo. I don't see that happening. I don't think that's necessarily realistic, but I just think that's how viable the whole Oladipo to Miami scenarios are. Bradley Beal, first off, I think Bradley Beal would be the perfect fit on this team, and for a number of reasons. I think the one thing this team is missing offensively is somebody who can do it all on that end of the floor. And Bradley Beal's defense is not very good. That's not a surprise. And yet you look around at this team and who you would be combining him with. He wouldn't have to be the best defensive player in the world if you were putting him on the floor with Bam Adebayo and potentially and Jimmy Butler, and then potentially however you decide to move those lineups around, he wouldn't have to be that defensive stopper. So with that said, I think he's also someone who is very honest when he says, I don't really want to leave Washington. Now, if John Wall comes back next year and they don't play well together, or they play well together, but the rest of the team just doesn't seem to mesh, potentially, yeah. And the Giannis situation, everybody wants Giannis. That's not a surprise. And I think same thing with him. I think if they go out and they win in this bubble situation, I don't see him leaving. And yet, if they don't, Miami's there ready to pounce. And I think much like with the scenario we saw a few years ago when the Big Three came together, Pat Riley has kind of cleared the deck. And obviously we have to see what happens with the salary cap, but Pat Riley and Andy Ellisberg have cleared the deck to where it doesn't have to be just Oladipo or just Giannis or just Bradley Beal. They can maneuver some things around and find a way to bring in two of those guys. So if that ends up appealing to one of them, or Victor Oladipo says, look, I want to be there, but you figure out who else you want to get to pair with me first. I think that could be the scenario where Miami ends up appealing to one of these guys a little bit more if and when a Bradley Beal or a Giannis decide to head out of there.
Nice.
Bam and Nunn aren't with the team right now. Like we know. Do we know when they're going to be the team, and how differently is this team going to run without them? Because I know Spoelstra was saying that he's going to do a lot of playing around with the lineup while they're not doing. He's doing a lot of experimenting, especially since they're not here. So what are we going to see?
I don't expect them at this point. We've got nothing to believe that they are going to miss any of these seeding games, or at least that they're going to be physically unable to participate in those games. Now, if you get into a situation where they get back a little later and you don't want to just throw them in against Denver, you want to give them some ramp up time to make sure that they're good to go in the playoffs, then maybe they sit out one or two of those games. But this has been kind of this like touchy situation. And it's, by the way, it's not just local media. Look around at a lot of players who did not travel with their teams to the Orlando bubble, and the NBA and the best reporters that covered the NBA are kind of standing back. Other than that first wave of guys who tested positive, guys like Jokic, Buddy Hield, Derek Jones Jr., ever since then, you've seen these big-time NBA reporters, if players are testing positive, let those players make the announcement. Right. And, it's hard because we don't want to be those people who are speaking for players who may potentially test positive. We have not been told specifically that that's why Kendrick Nunn and Bam Adebayo were not there. You may hear some things, and then we obviously had Goran Dragic say the first or second day that, okay, once they come back, well, then everybody automatically jumped out there. Whatever it happens to be, guys, I can't envision a scenario where Bam and Kendrick Nunn, where they're not a part of the games that really matter, the games that are, that first round playoff series, and where they're not 100% full go, again, assuming no setbacks between now and then. So to your question about lineups, things like that, any sort of experimenting that they do, I would throw it out the window once the games roll around that actually do matter.
Really? You think so? You don't think like they're going to try to have like Iguodala and Jay Crowder play more with Myers Leonard and see, what kind of lineup? Because I feel like DJJ's role might be going down a little bit,
Potentially, and yet I think what was the old saying? And I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but it's play 8 or go 8 deep, trust 7, play 6 or something like that. Whatever it is, I think it was a Pat Rileyism from years and years ago. Whatever it is, that once you get to the playoffs, and look, Eric Spoelstra said this a number of times that he feels like depth is going to be more important than ever, and yet they're not going to just play guys for the sake of playing them to get guys too much. Like, it's not going to be a matter of them trying to test that depth just for the sake of testing it, right? Yep. So to me, if Bam, Kendrick Nunn, Jimmy, Dragic, Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, and then Myers Leonard, those 7, I think that's still going to be a large part of your core. They're going to find minutes for sure for Iguodala. They're going to find it's going to be more matchup based who they're going against. And if they see, you go back to the finals a few years ago when the Warriors saw what Iguodala could do against Cleveland, and they played him, I think, even more than they normally would. So it'll be matchup based, but I think any lineups that they may play with a little bit, I think they know full well where their bread is buttered with this team, and I don't see them getting too far away. Now look, we know that Spo will play the hot hand, and he'll keep someone out like Jay Crowder if he goes out there and he's knocking down everything from long range. You know what he brings defensively. They're not going to pull him out of the game, but I don't think they're going to set a new lineup because Bam and Nunn are out that they're going to stay with come playoff time, right? Like those guys are going to find their way back to where their minutes were before they were out.
Clay, so Duncan Robinson, we've seen the stats that come out. I don't know if you saw it, that came out like today or it's been out for a while, but essentially the Heat are a 33-win team when he's not playing, and then they're like a 62-win team when he's on the court. So I guess my question is, how valuable is Duncan Robinson? Because going into the season, you couldn't trade him for your traditional veteran, but now you could probably get a couple of first-round picks or maybe a first-round pick and a nice player. Do you think he's going to get a lot of money, or what's the value increase for him, like just in a matter of the 50 games that they played so far?
It's incredible. It's incredible. I don't think I don't think you can understate it. And those numbers you threw out, do I think he's worth 30 wins? I mean, no. I mean, that's a what the win above replacement for that's more than a Wilt Chamberlain wins above replacement stat, right? And yet, I don't think you can understate. I don't think you can overstate how important he is in today's NBA. And by the way, I mean he's a big guy. I don't know that people realize
6'7".
He's 6'7", 6'8". So it's not just that he's out there finding ways to get around people and get off his shot. No, he can shoot over people. And he was talking the other day on the Zoom call we were on about working and finding new ways to get open. And I was on earlier this season, very early on with Tommy Tighe. I don't know if you guys ever catch his radio show. He's fantastic. But I made a comment that he reminds me a lot, watching him, of when I was growing up and watching Reggie Miller. In this respect, you watch him and he's nonstop running around. Ray Allen was very similar.
Right.
But Reggie Miller was the first one I remember that NBC would put their camera on him and they would not move when he was on offense. They would just follow him around, and he just never stopped. And that's what Duncan Robinson has done for this team. And so when you're going up against a defense and guys, somebody who's guarding Jimmy Butler has to constantly turn his head to make sure that he's, Duncan Robinson isn't jumping free over here. Well, what does that do if Butler sees a guy turn his head? Or what is it if Bam Adebayo has the ball top of the key and a big man kind of turns his head? Bam gets that step. So, no, and obviously, look, he and Tyler Hero both need to work on their defense a little bit, and yet they're certainly better. Duncan in particular is certainly better now than he was last year.
Right.
So, yeah, and I think, let's go back to your scenario about talking about potentially bringing guys in. I don't give up Duncan Robinson or Tyler Hero for Victor Oladipo. Because Victor Oladipo is going to be a free agent next offseason.
Yeah.
And so your leverage there is, hey, if he wants to be here, we can just wait and we can just trade for someone else and make Oladipo the final piece.
Right.
And if we can manipulate some cap space to make that work. So I don't offer one of those two guys up for much outside of an all NBA level quality player. And that's
Kendrick Nunn is probably the most available of the group.
Yes, of the young players, I agree.
Right.
I agree. And hey, he's a heck of a player, and everything that he's done, you give him a lot of credit. And yet, in today's NBA, when you're kind of picking out, okay, you need shooting, you need to spread the floor offensively. Those are the two guys, Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero, that other teams are going to look at and say, okay, I really want him. Because look, what happens if you say you want Victor Oladipo this offseason, right? And Indiana says, all right, you got to give us Duncan Robinson. Well, Andy Ellisberg and Pat Riley know full well they've had conversations with Washington. We know that. That's been reported quite a bit. And so they know who Washington would potentially like on their roster. If they decided to move on and try to hit the restart button next year, the reset button next year, you don't want to trade away a player that Washington could potentially want for a Bradley Beal and lose the opportunity to do that because you traded for a Victor Oladipo, who's very, very good, but you could have easily gone out and signed him next offseason.
Right. Yeah, gotcha.
Right.
I know you were saying like that the Heat are that you guys can see something from the Heat. They're all excited. They love what their atmosphere right now. They're all in on this. They're not complaining about food and anything. If you had to pick out a team that they are more worried about playing against, who would that team be? Or do they not express any concern about anybody?
They don't express a concern. I can tell you, I mean, my personal opinion, I don't want to see Boston.
Me either. No. They're loaded.
They're loaded, and I think also they're a team that's going to have that sort of mindset in that bubble. I know Heat fans love giving Brad Stevens a hard time. He's still a heck of a coach.
Yeah.
And look, I think Toronto is obviously very good, and but the Heat, I think the Heat match up a little bit better with Toronto than they do against Boston.
Yeah, I think the Celtics are our worst matchup in the whole. I think probably the whole league.
I agree. And look, Chris Middleton's a heck of a player, and yet I'm not as concerned about Chris Middleton and Eric Bledsoe outside of Giannis as I am when you're taking on a Boston team where you got to deal with Tatum, you got to deal with Jaylen Brown, who seems to be taking another step, and oh, by the way, if Gordon Hayward gets healthy, and he has not looked himself, but there have been times this year where he's shown some flashes. I mean, if those guys all come to play, that team's going to be a real problem. Philadelphia, I still say Philadelphia is probably the most talented team overall, but I still don't see those talented pieces fitting together like Boston's pieces do, like Milwaukee's pieces do right now. I think we heard the other day that Ben Simmons has been playing some power forward. Right. Okay, so what are you just not playing Al Horford many minutes now? I mean, he's somebody who I thought really made their defense formidable heading into this year, and yet so now you've just made the rest of the team take a step back because you're trying to find a place for Ben Simmons, who I think is very, very good. I just don't think that his game and Joel Embiid's game have meshed very well there with Tobias Harris, and it just doesn't fit as well as what you're seeing in Milwaukee and certainly what you're seeing in Boston.
Yeah, I think the plan for Al Horford is to run the second team, from my understanding.
Yes.
And I think the only concern with the 76ers when they're because I actually like the move of putting Ben Simmons as a power forward. My only thing is who's going to be that late game point guard. Yes. Who are you really going to say on that team is yes, we want you to make the decision of how the last play of the game is going to go.
Yeah, and so I agree with you. And so let me clarify. I like the move in a vacuum. It's more, again, you look at the rest of the roster and the fit, it's just not right, especially offensively. Defensively, look, if they figure it out, they're a problem. And yet, then you have games like the last game they played at the AAA where the Heat could do whatever they wanted. So there's something about them that just isn't right. And who knows, maybe they figure it out in the bubble and they make all of us look silly. But yeah, to your original question, Boston's a team that would scare me. I wouldn't want to drop to a 6 if at all possible. I'd want to stay in that 4 or 5 range because I'd rather see Milwaukee in the second round than Boston.
Yeah, true. Alrighty. Well, jumping off the Heat, and I know you're short on time. Just quickly, I know you mentioned, I guess you're big on the Marlins too. Is there any players that's going to make the starting roster that you're excited about? And then is there any players within the prospect list between the minor leagues that you're excited about as well?
Well, and just to be clear, I just like the attitude the Marlins. I'm not saying they're going to go and do anything big, just because I still think there's a talent gap there. We're talking about major league talent right now; they're just not there yet. But in a 60-game season, and this is what they're embracing, you start out, I don't know, 10-4. Like if you jump out to a 10-4 in a 162-game season, you're like, oh wow, that's kind of cute. That's fun.
Right. 10-4
in a 60-game season, you're already a quarter of the way through the season. Yeah. So, Yeah, so I think they're kind of looking at it as this is our opportunity to capitalize in a season where if we were playing 162 games, maybe we wouldn't get the opportunity to.
They're still in contention with 60 games left.
Yeah, exactly. I found it. I was a little surprised by the level of praise that Don Mattingly had for Sandy Alcantara the other day. I mean, look, we've seen it. We've seen that he's got great stuff. But the level of praise that Mattingly was throwing at him, and specifically his stuff, saying he could get up there with a Verlander, with a Scherzer, with a Kershaw, that once he learns to harness it and he's getting better with becoming a pro. I was a little surprised by that, but I mean the guy that answers both of your questions, both for right now and also among the prospects, it's Monte Harrison.
Yeah,
the ball just I mean, did you see that video the Marlins put out where? I mean, the ball just makes that sound coming off of his bat. And, I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be a major league scout. Like, I love baseball, but I've never been able to, like, distinguish what makes a guy great at the minor league level. And what I got to cover, my last job was in Fort Myers. And so we covered the Fort Myers Miracle, and the Minnesota Twins had a bunch of guys come in that were very good. But in my first year there was Joe Mauer was playing single A ball. And like you look at him, you're like, okay, that guy's different. And so like I can tell that, but I'm not going to be able to pick out the best prospects. I do know that watching Monte Harrison and hearing how Don Mattingly and other players talk about him, there's a sense that he's kind of jumping to the forefront of potentially being that guy, and they need that guy. There is not that face of the franchise type player yet in that organization. You look around and you see some of these young players around the league who have that ability, and the Marlins don't have that guy yet. Well, I think they're starting to think that Harrison has a chance to be that guy.
Or Blade.
Yeah, I mean, certainly. And again, you're talking about hasn't been in the major league system long enough to really like capitalize. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. Those guys. Harrison is the one that I think, especially Don Mattingly, and again, in addition to Alcantara, Mattingly has seen something in. Okay. And, that's kind of all we can really go on at this point. I think he's the one that is going to get an opportunity. And if he makes the most of it, then certainly he could be that guy.
Have you heard anything about Jazz Chisholm and Lewin Diaz? We also got him, I think, from Arizona.
Not as much with Diaz. And Chisholm was also late coming in. So I think I can't remember if he was on the injured list or if it just took a while for him to come to camp, and people were speculating on why. But that's kind of where it is right now, and we respect that. I have no clue what the reasons were, but again, you get on Twitter and people have their opinions. So I think we'll find out more on those guys in the coming days. And hey, let's see who's in the lineup we're recording this Friday. Let's see who's in the lineup on Tuesday. I mean, the exhibition game, it's coming fast. And we're going to really get to see what these guys have. And then 7 days, man, it's opening day. I'm excited.
Have you got your Tua jersey yet?
No, maybe I should though. And then wait to sell it when he's actually going to be starting, because I don't see him. Knowing Brian Flores, I just don't think he's not just going to turn over the keys to this car.
Nope.
Yeah, and they love Ryan Fitzpatrick, and they love him as a person. I think they feel like they found something in him as far as they know what works with him, and obviously, you're going to see what happens when you're bringing in new offensive coordinator. But again, you're bringing in coaches who know him as well.
Yep.
So anyway, I'm excited. I'm glad. I think Dolphins fans have every reason to be excited about Tua moving forward. I think that starts in 2021. Okay. And hey, look, unless he goes out there and he just blows everybody away, they're still planning on starting on the 28th. And if he goes out there and he blows everybody away, then obviously we're having a different discussion. I feel like there's a comfort level with Ryan Fitzpatrick. And look, I think this team has added a lot of talent. And in the AFC East right now, I'm not all in on Josh Allen. I think he's got a lot of talent, and yet he's got to refine a lot of stuff. Tom Brady's gone. Cam Newton, I still the health issues scare me.
Yep.
And again, I told you guys I'm a Saints guy, and I watched him twice a year, and he was brutal to go against.
Last 2 years.
Up until 2017, he scared you to death. Last 2 years, the injuries have taken their toll. It's a shoulder and a foot.
Right.
The Jets are the Jets. There's a real opportunity for the Dolphins, man. And I'm not just saying that as somebody who's hoping to be around the team if and when they let media back out there. There's a real opportunity in that division, and it's not just because everybody, there's no Brady and there's going to be attrition elsewhere. They were starting to build something towards the end of last season, and I feel like the moves they made in the offseason, I think they're going to be in a really good spot. I happen to think Byron Jones is a top 2 or 3 cornerback in the league. If Xavier Howard comes back healthy, their secondary is going to be nasty. So I just think all of that to say there's too much on the line, and I think there's too much opportunity for them to just hand the keys to the car over to Tua when I think Ryan Fitzpatrick has at least proven that he can do enough to be the leader of this team and potentially make a run at the AFC East.
So Clay, you're not an Adam Gase fan? Because I heard that he might want to join. He might want to join the Saints to help him out a little bit.
You know what's funny? When he first got here, I liked him a lot. And by the way, I wasn't the only one. I think a lot of players really liked him. And and they always say that adversity really proves the true character of somebody, right? When things started to go wrong, and players started getting thrown under the bus. And then now you're seeing that in New York with the Jets too. I think, unfortunately, he's somebody who, when things are going really well, he's your best buddy. And look, he was great to us. And I'm not going to be somebody who's going to sit here and rip a guy and how he treated us on the way. He treated us well. And yet, I think you saw what happened with players when things started to go sideways on the field. They were the first ones to get blamed, and players don't like that too much. That organization is just a disaster, and I just don't see it getting any better until he's gone. Yeah, exactly.
This is my last question, and I'll let Ryan get his last question in. Zion Williamson had to leave the bubble. How big of a deal is that for the NBA? I know that they're going to try to make it so that he can be back on time for the Lakers game, but how big of a deal is Zion going out of the bubble? I know he had a family emergency, and I 100% understand that. NBA's perspective, how big of a deal is that for them?
Well, look, I mean, they want him back. I don't think there's any – they want him to be in those games. And again, this is –
especially the first game back of the NBA.
Now, with that said, you're still talking about a night when you're going to get a chance to see LeBron and Kawhi. And so it's still going to be a good night. But no, I mean, there's no doubt that, hey, look, man, one of the big reasons why they're pouring $150 million into this bubble is because they're expecting to make that up in TV revenue.
Right.
They're expecting to find ways to make up that money. And they're not just doing this just because they like putting on basketball games. And a big reason for that, a ratings goal is Zion Williamson. So, yeah, it's important. But I don't think they're panicking. I really think that the league has done so much to put this into motion. And Adam Silver is somebody who thrives in these sorts of scenarios. I think he's great at thinking outside the box. He's great at taking input from other people and trying to put it all together. So I wouldn't say it's like any sort of a disaster or anything like that, because I think people are going to watch that first night just to see the stars later on. Even if Zion's out, they're going to watch for the curiosity factor. They're going to watch to see what Adam Silver and the people who he works with have put together.
Nice. All right, and my last question, I'm going to take you down memory lane a little bit. So like you mentioned, sports memorabilia. I also saw that some people used to call you Mr. Mint.
Oh, yeah.
Do you still collect memorabilia? Like, are you actively purchasing, or is that slowed down?
Nope. Once you get married and you have kids, that all goes out the window, my man. All that money's going into college funds now. But, what's funny is when I was a kid, the stuff that I loved was the really old stuff, and I'm still into that. Like I always remember like the first old card that I got that I just loved. It was a 1954 Topps Yogi Berra.
Wow.
And he won the MVP that year, and I was just like, I slept with that thing. And I think I was 7 years old. I was 7 or 8 years old. And my dad's a big Yankee fan, and he used to tell me all these stories about going to games and watching Mickey Mantle play. And so since my father was involved in it, he was happy to financially assist.
Right.
And so like, because I adopted, it kind of brought him back to his childhood a little bit. So he wasn't somebody who would just go out and buy me stuff. But if I was a little short and I happened to want a card of a player that maybe he watched when he was a kid, he would kind of make up the difference a little bit. So it was something that my father and I did together. And some of the memorabilia stuff, we would go to shows together, and I would save up my money, and we would kind of collaborate on what it was that it's like, oh, tell me about this guy. Okay, well, I kind of like that. And so it was something that we would do together, and it's something we still discuss, and that's why I'm in this business is following sports because of him. But I think he knew all along that once you find the woman that you're going to spend the rest of your life with, hanging up a Chuck Taylor Converse signed by Bill Russell as your centerpiece of decoration in your living room isn't going to fly anymore.
Well, I have my man cave back here, so I got my LeBron jersey signed here, but I still collect memorabilia myself, and I'm active on eBay. I just don't buy the high items. I just try to do little investments here and there.
What's your so LeBron's got to be the number one piece. What else?
Well, I have a Kobe jersey also.
Kobe?
Yeah, Kobe.
Oh wow!
But because actually I have a family member that has courtside seats for the Lakers, and they have relationships there. So I got that was for my bar mitzvah when I was 13. It's kind of random.
Cool.
Nice to have
That's
it.
Great. That's great.
But actually, my best stuff is probably like my Randy Moss, like graded autographed rookie cards, because he was my favorite growing up. But I don't have like any of the old Yankee stuff or anything like that.
Well, and I'm older than you guys. I just turned 40. So the stuff that's old to me is a lot older to you guys. But the funny thing was I kind of got out of it when they started grading stuff, and also when there was this saturation of like insert sets,
right.
And it got to be a little bit too much. And it was like at the beginning when I was really into, I don't know if you guys remember, it was the Topps Finest and the refractors. Like those were awesome.
Yeah.
And then you had all these one-of-ones, but is a one-of-one really all that special when you had 18 different one-of-ones?
That's happening right now. There's so many different parallels of one-of-one or 1 of 10 and then 1 of 20, and then it's like the same guy. Zion Williamson has but his cards are unbelievably priced right now, like $500 for just a standard rookie card of his.
It's crazy. That's crazy. I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. Like for me, I love the fact that there was one Mickey Mantle rookie. There was the Topps one then that was his second year, but it was the more expensive one. But like you knew if you wanted a Mickey Mantle rookie, it was that 51 Bowman. If you wanted the gem, it was the 52 Topps. And I after it mid to late 90s when they really started to overly saturate that stuff, I don't know. I don't know if I have the brain capacity to do that. I certainly don't anymore now that I have kids.
Alrighty.
Well, thanks, Clay, for joining us. It was awesome having you here on the show. Maybe we'll try to get you on again. Maybe if the Heat win something that they're not supposed to, we have 0% of chance. We'll get you on.
That's right. If they overcome the 0%.
Yeah, but it was awesome having you.
Anytime, guys. Take care. It was fun.
So make sure you follow us on Twitter. Make sure you follow. Clay's gonna follow us on Twitter now. Make sure you go on to 5 Reasons Sports Network. Get some shirts. We got some really good shirts, and keep following us on our YouTube page. We got some more stuff coming up.
All right.
Take care, fellas.
Later, Clay.